Good morning.
Good morning.
Did everybody step away for their coffee? I don't believe you're really there yet.
I'm here. I got my meal shake, my protein shake.
Cool. And Marcy's been around for a long time, but I don't know if she is actually at her desk right now or not.
I am.
Allison, you there?
I am here. We are having some wild internet issues, so I'm probably in the chat and off the video in order to preserve my online ability.
Not a problem. If I missed something that's asked in the chat, somebody else feel free to let me know, and we'll make sure we keep you all involved. Yeah, I went ahead and started recording today since I was asked last time. This is something I need to get doing with these. We've been having some requests, but hi, and I want to start off with, has everybody's morning started off just like that nice relaxing music? I'm hoping that y'all are all coming in just wonderfully relaxed and recharged and ready to learn. No? Okay, well, let's just start off with a question. I do want to go around the circle real quick. Just say your name, your agency, and then I want you to say, when you were a child, what was your defining favorite candy? I think most of us had something. So somebody want to volunteer to go first?
I'll go. Let me turn on I'll probably leave my camera off for the most part here, but so I'm Bree. I use she, her pronouns. I'm the Crisis Intervention Program Manager at the Sexual Assault Resource Center, or SARC. And this was not my favorite candy as a child, but they've got a candy store at Washington Square, and my son just had a birthday, and they've got these Zots, which reminded me of my childhood because they used to sell them at the corner store. So yeah, they're like these little hard candies that I think like fizzle or crackle or something.
You foam at the mouth with those, yeah.
Yeah, but unexpectedly, right? So yeah, I was just reminded of a fun childhood memory this weekend. So yeah, I'll give you that one.
Great. Why don't you call on somebody? Bree, who would you like to go to next?
Let's do Marcy.
Good morning. Marcy Manning with Haven. I am the new interim executive director. And my favorite candy when I was little, I think, was Smarties. It seemed like they were always everywhere and something that was super accessible. So Smarties were everywhere.
And who would you like to call on, Marcy?
How about Lindsay?
Yeah, I can go. My name's Lindsay. He and pronouns. I'm the community education program manager over at SARC. Yeah, thinking about it, I think, chocolate's always been the favorite. So Reese's Cups is the way to go. But obviously there's a certain preference on shape. So the egg shape at Easter time is clearly the best Reese's Cup. Although the Christmas tree is a rival. So yeah. Brandy, I'll have you go next.
Thanks, Lindsay. I love these little check-ins. Brandy Sellover, she, her pronouns, and I'm the executive director at the Sexual Assault Resource Center over in Beaverton. And defining candy as a child, I keep going back to Jolly Ranchers. So Jolly Ranchers, and in particular the cherry flavor. Like I would sift through the bag of something, right, to find the red cherry, and the apples and all that sort of stuff was always left over. I got my money's worth because it took a long time to get through that piece of candy.
You know what came before even those, Brandy? Did you ever see those little cherry barrels?
Oh yes.
Those were, when I was a kid, those are to die for. Yeah.
Calling out the age here. So those definitely. Well, then we will shift over to Allison, and it sounds like the crew over there at Sable House.
Yeah, hi, I'm Allison. I use she, her pronouns. I'm the assistant director over at Sable House in Polk County. And gosh, Lindsay, I am similarly fond of chocolate. So my one chocolate candy that was my favorite when I was little were Fifth Avenue bars.
Mm.
I loved those, and I never can find them anywhere now. And then my other is kind of brandy-esque because do you remember they were like 5 cents, kind of by like the lemon head, the boxes of lemon heads, but they were those cherry gumball things that were in like individual little wrappers, and the outside was like this super hard cherry candy, and then the inside was gum that lost its flavor in 2 seconds. But I love those. We would buy like handfuls of them because they were, like 5 cents at the time. So maybe aging myself a little bit there also. And we'd walk to soccer practice and stop by the little corner store and grab some of those and then head on to practice. So yeah, between a Fifth Avenue bar and those gumballs, I was a happy kid.
I guess that
And
leaves.
Vanessa, that'll leave you.
Yeah, that leaves me, Vanessa Willard with the Oregon Coalition, she, her. And I am the Coalition Database and Technology Administrator. So was hired on 4.5 years ago to start running with the database and get it flushed out. And I've stayed on since then. And we've expanded what I'm doing. And for my candy, see, my grandma owned a little grocery store, gas station, post office in a little tiny town in Iowa. And from an early age, one of the things she would let the kids do is take a little sack and go out and get candy from, when we visit. So from the grocery store part. So yeah, we had all those penny candies. They were wonderful. But I think my favorite back then was anything with a Hershey bar with almonds, or a special dark Hershey. Though I later grew up and realized that wasn't the best chocolate, and I fell in love with Cadbury. And at the time, and I still have grown since then, but Cadbury was just like, to die for as a kid. So, and it wasn't easy to find because that's back when they didn't have US Cadbury yet. So I think everything was being imported from Canada or England. So it was good. However, as a kid, transition here, smooth transition. As a kid, I had a bad habit. My mom worked at a bank, and as I was growing older, she stopped having me babysit. And so I sometimes get home a half hour to an hour before her from school. And then she'd get home, and I would sometimes raid whatever was in the kitchen. I don't know if any of you ever did that or went looking for stashes of stuff. And one day I really wanted chocolate, and I couldn't find chocolate anywhere. And I was looking for a chocolate bar, and we didn't have any. And then suddenly I was looked behind the baking stuff, and there was a huge chocolate bar. It was a brand I didn't recognize. It was called Baker's. But I go, cool, I found a chocolate bar, and broke off a big hunk, took a bite. And this thing was the most horrible thing I've ever eaten in my life because it was bittersweet chocolate. It was like, it's the stuff that's supposed to be used for baking, and you add sugar to it. So it was just like, as a kid, I was just dying. It was horrible. As we head into reports, I just want you to think through. I'll finish the story and then we'll catch up with Christy too. What we look at with reports today, all reports are not the same. They may look like a Hershey bar, but it might be a Baker's unsweetened bar. It may pull different information, and you may catch yourself comparing two things and going, how come they don't match? It's because they don't do the same thing. And that's something you'll get used to as we go through. You'll start to find out what things are good for what things. And as you have questions, you'll be able to come to me for resources on that. Christy had a little lesson on this the other day, so she's familiar with it. But just remember, not every candy bar is sweet. So Christy, we were going around sharing names and where we're from, and then also what candy did you love as a child?
Christy David, and I'm from Klamath Falls at the Klamath Advocacy Center, Marta's house. My favorite candy bar as a kid and still today is a Rocky Road.
Ooh, you're fancy.
I love the marshmallows.
Great. Well, as we get started today, today's going to be, we probably will end up not using the full 3 hours that are scheduled. This normally falls 2 to 2.5 hours for this meeting, but because of that, you can ask a lot of questions as we go. I'm going to share my screen with you and we'll start going through it. Well, before I do though, let me ask one last question. How many of you were actually at the last training? Yeah, I think pretty much everybody. Cool, because we will build off of that. Okay, let me start sharing screen. And let me bring over, I want to start off with just a reminder. I had given you the guide for data entry. And in that guide, I sent it out. If you go down, skip the intentionally blank page, that's there in case you print it off. But on the table of contents, we're going to kind of head into this other resources section from there on, but the addendum. And I just want to mention to you right off that there will be some things today that will be good for you to come back and check, and I will mention these later. But we're going to give you, I sent you this morning, the actual FTE percentage calculator. There is a great link here in Osnium for more support information. There's the videos on YouTube that Thomas had done before with us. Osnium online documentation, another set is there, and their quick start guide. All of that stuff you can find if you need it. So I just want to remind you on that. And we'll come into some of that other stuff in a little bit, but let's go to the database itself. As we're looking at, we're going to start off with reports, and then we'll go into admin functions. As we're looking at reports in Osnium, there are basically 4 types of reports you can run. The first is going to be the ones you use the most, the funder reports. You click the drop down, come down to reporting, funder reports, and you're going to see this list of reports. I have one here that you don't have. You will be getting it soon. It's getting close to done, probably at the end of the month, this combined state report, which will take the place at that point of striving to meet the need and ODSVS. In January, this is the one you'll use when you run your reports. But you get this, and these are your reports. These are basically one-click reports. We created them on purpose, so you would have to do very little. You do have to do some prep work on some of these, but otherwise they're pretty straightforward. FIFSA is one of the most straightforward. So I'm going to pull it up first as an example. I don't have a lot of data in here, so the dates I'm going to put will not necessarily make sense compared to what you would do. Like I'm going to go 1/1/2017 to 12/31/2020. You'd never do that reporting period, but that's just so I can actually pull some data. And this is all fake data, so you don't have to worry about that. Now this actual start date is a typo in, I think this is only in the test database. I don't think you have this here, but if you do, that is actually talking about the blackout date, which is something I need to mention to you. Let me see if I have that up to go. Blackout date. I don't have it there. I have it. I'm sorry, I should have had this one ready to go. Let me explain it and see if this is clear enough. A blackout date is to determine who is new and who is returning. So the best example of this would be on Basically VOCA would be a good one. October 1st is the beginning of the fiscal year. And because of that, your blackout date would be October 1st. Now, what does this affect? If somebody comes on September 28th, and then they return on let's say October 10th. So September 28th and October 10th, that blackout date has happened in between them, and it has reset their status from a returning client to a new client. So when they come in October, since it's past that blackout date, which is the beginning of the new fiscal year, they are a new client. Every single client as of October 1st is a new client. However, if they come on October 10th and then they return on November 15th, they are then in November, they are a returning client. Or if they come in October 10th and they come the next quarter in January 14th. In January, if you run a quarterly report, they're going to show up as a returning client. Any questions on that? Does that make sense to you?
So essentially, it's just based on the grant cycle, that particular grant cycle.
Correct.
Okay.
And to be honest, not that many ask the question, are they new or returning? So it's based, if they ask that question, you need to have it there. You can pretty much, it only makes a difference if the report asks it. If the report doesn't ask it, or if you're running a flex report, it really doesn't make a difference. But I take that back. On a flex report, they may have a line that says returning. So yeah, it's just the beginning of the fiscal cycle for that report. Or in the case of, I do believe there's one exception, would be on co-located advocates still talk. I used to be there. I'm not sure this question still is there. If they were there the month before and they want to know whether they're returning or not, then you would put the first date of your report cycle for the report you're running as a blackout date for the co-located. That would probably be the exception. But that's always a safe date to put anyway. If you're not sure, put it as the first date. If you can't see any questions where they ask for new or returning. And if you're not sure on blackout dates, I do have a cool little chart I'll send out to you afterwards, and that might help with the whole situations. But you're definitely going to run it on VOCA. I think VAWA uses it, FIPSA doesn't, if I remember right. And I think co-located, but I'd have to glance beyond that. So you set your blackout date, and then you'll click on submit. And that's really all the deals you do, is set your date parameters and submit the report. In the case of FIPSA, it's going to be fairly straightforward. And I'm calling up to Canada now, Eastern Canada, no less. Yeah, so there it comes. So I may have delays on stuff, and I may not be able to adjust a couple things you could. And it will run the report. Now, because I can't adjust this because it's in Eastern Canada and it's adjusted to basically their printer back there, I can't adjust this. However, you could on yourself, if you had this problem, you could come up to on the page before and actually, let me see if I can show you. Yeah, you could come up to this report designer on that report and adjust the column widths if you needed to, so you didn't have that overlapping page issue. Let me come back to what we were looking at. Okay, but this will give you your report, and FIPSA is straightforward. It's just going to pull the numbers. Are some formulas in here that are hidden, but there's no FTE percentages. Everything is full stats. So it's pretty straightforward, and it's a short report. So you run this, there shouldn't be too much problem. You can look at it. But when you go to send it in, this FPSA normally gets turned into DHS. You're gonna wanna export it to Excel. Will be your choice. And it will come off exactly how they need it to be. At that point in time, this column under clients with all the numbers, you can edit as you need to before you would send it in. You can't change anything else. You can't change any formatting, you can't. But you can change it and send it in. DHS is using a merge tool, so that's why you cannot mess with anything else except for that column numbers. Any questions on that? Okay, that's the easy one. Now, when you get into VOCA and Muskie, something else comes into play. Anybody have, I mentioned it earlier, but anybody have a clue what is going to be impacting those reports? It's that VOCA and Muskie say that you are reporting on stats that only the people who are funded by VOCA and Muskie had. So it's not your full agency stats.
Can I ask a quick question about that?
Sure, sure.
Volunteers or interns who are supervised by a staff who is funded by VOCA or related to Muskie, would you set them to be VOCA or Muskie in the FTE, or is it just staff? Does that make sense?
That would actually probably be a question to ask for VOCA. I would ask, I'm sorry for the coffee, DOJ, and probably to, let's see, our contact over there. My brain is all over the place, so let me get slowed down.
Okay, thanks.
Christine Hyen. And if you need her email address is on the email I sent out to you guys because she had thought she might be able to drop in today. Christine would be the VOCA person to check with and ask her. I would imagine you could include them, but I am not sure. I deal with how the database works. If they do, then I would set them up in Osnium, and you're going to do the same thing you would do with your actual advocates to give them an FTE percentage.
Okay.
But if they do not have, what's really important, if they do not have, I'm going to take a cough drop. If they do not have privilege, then you would need to not give them credentials. You could set them up in Osnium. With no credentials. And that way you can track their stats, but they can't come in and look at people's privileged information. And we'll talk about that a little bit later to clarify why that would be.
That makes sense. And then one other quick question. Muskie is
Sure.
associated with VAWA, is that correct? Or
Yes, it is. Muskie and VAWA are equivalent terms.
got it. Thank you.
Okay, so if you come into Muskie or VOCA, and VOCA, I'll let you know right now, I'm going to be reinvestigating the first couple questions. There have been how we had set it up. Now there's some questions coming from DOJ on whether they want it set up that way or not now. So we may change a couple of those. They were set up to have a few of the questions be full agency questions. And now we may break them down also into actual FTE questions. Let me come back up. The thing you need to do before VOCA and VAWA, this is important, is you need to make sure your FTE percentages are ready to go. Oh, close print preview is open. Gotcha. Okay. So what you would need to do is there are two ways of doing FTE percentages. Basically what that's saying is you have a person who is 50% VOCA and 50% BAWA. We'll give that as an example. You can take that person and take every single service, referral, and activity, the outreach activity that they do, and you can track those and assign each one to which funding stream it was actually for. And that's totally fine to do. But that is a total pain. Most advocates do not actually know where stuff should be assigned. And what has happened in the past, especially a couple of years ago, was that every time it came up to report time, executive directors were having to go through every single thing that every single advocate did and assign to where it should be funded, which was kind of a nightmare. And that's been around the country too. That's not just been here in Oregon. So what people have been changing to is called FTE percentage, your full-time equivalency. So if a person is 50% VOCA, then all the stats that she would do for services, all the stats she would do for referrals and for activities would all be taken times 0.5 in the VOCA report. So if a person had 100 activities or 100 services that they had done, 50 of those would count in VOCA. Any questions so far? And what this would do is it greatly streamlines the process for the EDs and for the funders. The feeling from the funders, from both DOJ and DHS, is those numbers would be much more accurate than what they were getting before, and they're thrilled with them. And what we're striving for here with the whole reports is not perfection. We're striving for excellence. We want your numbers to be consistent and excellent and to tell a story over time. So that's the thought behind it. To do this, what you need to do is you need to know who your different staff are. You would go to staff. You would go to, I'm sorry, that's not staff activities, other staff list. And you pull up your staff, and I don't have people you would actually recognize, but I'll go here to Thomas. And you pull up your staff person who is involved with VOCA. Then you'd want to come over and look at staff funding. And before you run the report, you want to make sure that Thomas is set with the correct percentage. If you need to adjust it, then you need to double click it and adjust it. And 50% is 50.00, not 0.50. I've had a few people do that. And you can only put, you can put in whatever you want, but the only two that are used in reports are VOCA and BAWA. Anything else will not pull into a report, so it'll make no difference. And you will put those in before you, each time before you run the report, and make sure they're set the way you need for that time period for that person to be. Which brings a whole nother question. The problem that can come up is likely you're going to have people who change positions and FTE percentages over a reporting period. So if a person starts off the year at 30%, they may go to 40% later in the year, and then end up the year at 50%, which throws this whole percentage off. What do you do? Well, we've come up with an answer for you at this point, which comes back to the tool I sent to you. And that is, let me pull it up. It is the Fte Calculator 2.0. And I'm going to show you with macro enabled. This is the best version to use, but you may or may not. Sometimes different agencies have a security set that won't allow you to run the macro.
Really quick question,
Sure.
Vanessa. And we want to be looking at that at the reporting, like whatever period we're pulling the report is what we want to be looking at for the period of the percentages of FTE.
Correct.
Is that correct? Okay.
Correct. And Bree, what you do is, okay, say you had this horrible employee, we'll say, and it was VOCA. This is just so you can, I encourage you to print it off. If you need to run a 3-month, quarter, 6-month, or 12-month, and you can even do a 3-month on the 12 months, you can do whatever you need there. But we'll say like we're running a 12-month annual. And you can follow this straight down, choose the appropriate period length, 3, 6, or 12. Enter all months that have an FTE value. For a month when the employee was an advocate but wasn't funded by this stream, enter 0. For a month where the employee wasn't an advocate, leave the cell blank. So for example, suppose I started off as your front desk administrative assistant, wasn't an advocate for the first 3 months. You'd leave it blank. During that time, I had passed my 40-hour core, and I started to be considered for doing advocacy, but I wasn't yet. For 2 months, I was still on probation. And then on the 6th month, I went into doing 40% of my schedule was advocacy. Well, actually, let's see, we'll keep 7th month the same, 40%. After 2 months, I proved myself 4,000%, it's not good. Oh, why is that doing that? Let's clear this just a second. Okay, so I was at 40%. Let me see if I've got a problem on this. Nope, it got an error somehow. And they actually decided, you know what, you're doing a great job. We're gonna have you end up the year at 100%. I'm hitting something here that's making that do that, so. I've never had this do it. And like I said, we'll say the first 3 months I was just admin assistant. And then at the 4th month, we'll say I actually became, I passed core training, so I was an advocate, but I wasn't doing any VOCA yet. And then in the 6th month, I started doing 40% VOCA. 8th month, I did 50% VOCA. And on the 10th and 11th and 12th, I was 100%. Then when you get done, this month's active is going to show you the months you were active as an advocate. So 9 months active as an advocate, and the percentage that you would enter in as their FTE percentage in Osnium would be 53.33%. And what I would do at that point in time myself would be, I would print it off. It's formatted to do that right away. Print it off, stick it in a folder for whoever your advocates are for that reporting period you're doing, so you have them all together. Any questions about that? All the steps are right there. And you just need to make sure for each reporting period, this is key, that you do that for every employee that is going to be needed in that report. Otherwise, they would not be pulled to that report. In fact, if you, the first question I will likely ask you, if you call me saying, we're not getting information in this report, or as much information, I will ask you, did you set the FTE percentages for all the advocates who are doing work? And just so you know, that spreadsheet is going around the country. So people are using it various places. So it's got a good approval. for the use for the tool. Any questions on that?
Vanessa, just a clarification
Sure.
point. I make sure I understand that piece. So say we had the report, we set up the FTEs, of course, for a report that we're pulling and completing, and then 6 months later, we have shifted the FTEs in Osnium to reflect what the current status is for that particular employee.
Mhm.
And so now, if we were to run that report again, the data from that 6 months earlier would
Be changed.
be changed. It would be different.
Right. In fact, what you need to do is don't think of it as a data point on your employee's record. It's not. It's
Mhm.
something you set before you run the report. It's a parameter. So if you're running that report for the last year, you need to
Mhm.
set what the FTE would have been for the last year. If
Mhm.
you're running it for the last 6 months, or if you're running it for 6 months, the first 6 months of the year, which you could do, and you're at the end of the year already,
Mhm.
set the FTE for whatever that reporting period would have been on that person. So it's really a parameter of the report, not of the employee, if that makes sense. And it has to be set every time you run you will need it every time you run a VOCA or Muskie report.
Mhm. Okay, thank you.
You bet. Any other questions? I'd be glad to help you with that if you have a trouble remembering it. But the tool itself has good instructions. And once you set those FTEs, it should do the heavy lifting for you on all the percentages. Otherwise, if you've set those, you run the reports, they're all one click, except for when you get to the co-located report, you're going to see one little thing that comes up. And this one has the right term with the blackout date. You're going to see, again, it's not aligned. This will all be on one page for you. And you can always use the PDF for your own use. That's totally fine. And if, I should have made this point before, what you're going to want to save this in is whatever, you need to think through whatever your funder wants, however they want the data turned in. For DOJ, you're going to be entering it on their website. So you just need to print off whatever you need to go down through the questions to type it into the website. Same thing with VOCA. FIPSA gets turned into DHS. That you need to do export as an Excel. And when you turn in the report to the DHS for the year, you need to export it to Excel. Everything else, pretty much, you can just, besides FIPSA and the DHS report and the co-located report, everything else you can pretty much print off whatever is the best way for you to see as you enter those numbers into the web. Does that make sense? Okay. When you run this report on the co-located, there is one thing that's different. It has to do with the fact that because we're pulling different services, referrals, and activities that your different advocates have done, there's no way to predict how many columns it would take. So we can't run that in a set mergeable report like this. We have to run that in the flex reports. So you're going to see when you get to question 6, it's going to say count the number of direct service hours that the advocate performed this month. It says, please run the following supports for this agency specific section. And it shows you 2 flex reports. Yep. And same thing on question 9. They are pulled from that report. So what you would do when you turn this in for the co-located report is you would run the co-located report, export to Excel. Then you would close it. And you can always adjust the numbers if you need to before you would send it to them. But then you would come over to the second type of report, which is, and I'll just show this to start off with, and we'll go into it in a second more. You go over to Flex Reports and you pull up the funder sub-reports. And these are the two reports that you would send in and attach to that other report. And that's just for co-located. So let's take a step back. We were at reporting, funder reports. Those are all the one-click reports. And this is, I should tell you, we were the first coalition in the country, first people with Osnium and almost any platform to push for doing one-click reports. So we're working the kinks out of them, but it's something, otherwise what you would have to do is you'd have to run different reports, pull all your numbers, and then you'd have to piece them all together. This is something that took major work and has incredible value. And one of the largest coalitions in the country, Texas, now is trying to do the same thing off of what we did. They're building on it too. So it's going to be something that catches on. But any questions about these? If you run into problems, if you have missing reports, that happens on occasion, call Osnium and they can fix it in a second, or send them an email and they will fix it in a second. Second type of report, besides the one-click reports, those were the easy ones. The next one is easy in its own way, but you would come up to the drop-down, reporting, flex reports. Can anybody tell me in any way, shape, or form what Boolean logic is?
Can you repeat the question? I didn't hear what type of object you said, Vanessa.
It's logic. It's Boolean logic.
Oh, gotcha.
If you don't know, that's fine. You use it all the time.
The if then?
Yeah, it's kind of, that's basically it. It is statements of like, it's what you use in filters, basically. If you're saying, I want to pull all of my clients who received this service, but not this service, that's a Boolean logic statement. And that's what you get into in Flex reports. Flex reports are, as we click these open, you're going to see a whole list. And I should mention this too. Under Flex reports, you come to these different categories. First category, additional reports. This is a couple of people asked for the ability to do their monthly services by day. So Thomas made up a report for that. If you want that specific thing to where it breaks it out by day, you can do it there. Display reports, ignore. You cannot run them from here if you tried to. They are for something else. But the Flex reports, then you can come into them and there's this whole list. And basically a Flex report is a filtered report on one area of the database. The great example is if you come to services, services Flex report. We'll double click on that. And you're going to see it's similar looking, but it's different because, and the first thing I would encourage you to do is drag this across so you can actually see what's coming down those columns. But you're going to see all these different parameters. But to be honest, the only ones you have to set are these first three. And you can run everything without filtering if you want to. So let's see, blackout date. We'll say that's 1/1/2017. Again, I'm using one weird dates because of I'm trying to pull whatever data we have in this. And the end date we'll say is 12/31/2020. Okay. And at this point in time, you could choose to filter by new or returning. You could do residential, non-residential. You can do the state type, adult, child, age bands. You can filter, this is important for a lot of people, by advocates. So you can pull up just a couple. If you click on that, you're going to see your full list of advocates. And I don't remember whether I mentioned this the other day, but when you're using when you're in this type of multi-pick, you can hold down Control and choose several at once, and then hit OK, and they will be chosen. I'm not going to do this because I want as much data as I can. But yeah, you could choose by that. You can choose the service type, which would be the big buckets on services. You can do any sort of filtering you want on this. You can filter if you're doing a service location. If you want just the services that were given at this shelter that you operate, great, you could do that. So you have full control over how you filter it. And once you're done, submit it. It'll take a little longer to run because you're doing custom filters. The one thing to realize is, well, there's several things to realize. What was I going to say? Okay, I lost that thread of thought, but I should come back to it. You're going to get this long report. And for you, you're probably going to have hundreds and hundreds of services if you ran this report. So a thing I'd like to do right away is hide details. Click on that, and it will get rid of all those individual services, and it'll go straight to your information, your stats. And it will give you your new returning, your residential, your stay types, numbers, your adult child, all your demographics, which is great. If you're looking for demographics of people served, this is where you would pull it the easiest. Service types, you can get all that information, co-case managed, co-located advocate. Now, oh, I know what I was gonna say, and that's fine, this fits in here. There are two limitations to these reports, and they're very important limitations. Is service report basically pulls from one area and a little bit extra. It doesn't pull from the whole database. So you can't get all your information that you need for VOCA from a service report. Second, bigger limitation for any funder report you'd be doing is that this Flex report has no formulas in it. This is raw data. So an example would be if somebody's looking for people who've been served with a shelter stay, or I mean with any sort of stay, housing, you would go to here in the stay type and you would see there's 5 different areas or 4 different areas. Here you can pull them because they're there with that number. But there's other things where certain answers for questions pull from 2 to 3 different fields and they're not side by side. When that happens on a funder report, that's all done automatically on those one-click reports. If you go into the service report, those numbers aren't. And plus the funder reports, if it's VOCA, is going to be run by FTE. So if you compare the numbers that you're getting in this Flex report to the one-click funder report, they're not going to be the same. Why? Because they're different types of chocolate. They look the same, but they don't do the same thing. And this is something you'll have to really get used to. These are the raw numbers. This is everything before you've run formulas. The funder reports are with formulas on almost every line. And I'll show you more about that in a bit. But these are a favorite. Every ED loves to run these reports, and they have a real good place because you can do almost anything you want to with these. And so no Flex reports. If you know how to filter things, that's what a Flex report does. Now, once you're done with it, you can come up here and export the document to almost any file format from Excel to PDF. You can print it. It's all there for you to play with. And let me go back a second. I'm going to close out of here. The next Flex report is the funder sub reports that we talked about a little bit earlier. These are what you add to the co-located report. And the last one would be HUD reporting. If you do HUD reporting, there is your keeper and your APR. One thing I just got asked this week on, so I'll show you. This is a great reminder. First off, I'm not the person really to train you on HUD. HUD is a whole different animal. There is a great site at Osnium. It's osnium.com/HUD. It's that easy. Osnium.com/HUD. That will take you through the HUD module very well. But if you're running HUD, just be really aware that you'll need to choose the federal program, the COC and the ESG, to run the two different reports. You have to run it once one way and then once the other way. So to get your two reports that you need to hand in. Any question about Flex reports at this point? I'm gonna stop screen sharing for just a second. Any questions so far? Because we're gonna move into a whole different type of reports in a second. Are we all tracking so far? Let me know if you're doing okay. Go to the reactions and give me a thumbs up. Marcy and Peck, are you doing okay? Yeah,
Yep, just couldn't open my screen back up to get to the reactions.
not a problem. I just want to make sure we're in good shape. And Peck, you doing okay? I'll assume probably stepped away from the desk, and that's fine. Okay, let me go back to sharing the screen. So we've done two types of reports so far. The first one were funder reports, which is the one-click report. The second one is Flex reports. The third one is going to look totally different, but this is a favorite of some EDs, and I kind of like it. And I use it when we're really troubleshooting. If somebody says, hey, I know we've got 50 services, but they're not showing up in this report, I will probably ask you, go down to lists, click on services, and let's see what you have. And I've got, and this would be gone. That's a filter that's in there. Let me get rid of it. And you get something like this. You're going to see just a ton of information. What it is doing is it's pulling up every single service that's in your database at this point. And so what you need to do is, for this to be of any value, you're probably going to want to come up to data service. Click, there's a little funnel here at the upper right of it. Let me check and see whether I can make this larger for you. This looks like it got set down again on size. Yeah, we can take it up one more. Is that better? Okay, you come up here to this funnel, click on it. And I like the values better than the date filters. You could do the date filters, but I like the values because it's going to show you what values you already have in there. So I'm going to say, I want to know everybody from 2018, or you can choose a certain amount of months. Once you've chosen that, you can close it and you have filtered out everything that's outside of that period. Now, the next thing I could go to is say, okay, I wanted everything that was actually related to, I'm going to choose everything that is, because I'm curious, everything that is null or other, and close. And there are 5 that are null or other. Odds, that means that on the related victimization, they didn't assign one. And one assigned other rather than sexual assault, domestic violence, or stalking. These are 5 that need to be investigated in this case, probably. So you can use this, and then once you get, you know, or if somebody has done a series of things that have entered wrong, you can catch it on this. And then once you get to where if you want to print it off or export it, you can right click anywhere on it to export and export it to CSV, export it to XLS, or email it. You can do whatever you want to. Say if you come up to this and you go, oh, I need to put state types on these. A cool thing is you can come up here to each line, click on the person's, double click on the person's name. Here's Victoria's record. And she does not have any victimizations. That's why they didn't assign it, which is not a good thing. So in that case, you know you probably need to create a victimization for that person. Let's see if this person has any. No, I bet that's going to be the problem for all of these. Yeah, they were created without victimizations. And that would cause errors in your report. And then once you're done, once you have done everything you want to with this list, you can come down here to that little X in the bottom left, click on it, and it will clear it to where you're back to every single service. If you have used Excel or Access, this probably will feel very, very familiar to you. But you're going to have all these areas, lists, services, services groups, program enrollment, stays, victimizations, partly served not met, referrals, protection orders. The others I wouldn't really worry about. Yeah, all of those are going to be available for this list view. Now you might notice that people in hotline calls aren't there. Why? Because if you go to people, and especially if you go to the full list of people, what are you looking at here? You're looking at the same view, a list view. And it does the same thing. If you hover over the title, you'll see the little cone. And I can come up here with that little cone if I wanted to, and decide to do, I only want adults in this list. And close it, and I've just filtered to adults only. Any questions about this at this point? This is definitely a troubleshooting type of view, but it comes in very handy. And it's very raw numbers again, too. It's just no formulas, no adjustments. It's just raw filtered information. Now, be honest. Do we have any Excel nerds in here who go, wow, that's the view I've been waiting for? There's normally 1 or 2. If so, I'm right there with you. I love Excel. Let's go to, there's one last view that you need to know about for our one last reporting. And that is going to be, and this is something you'll probably rarely use, but there might be an instance. Say if you're in the people and you have a client come in, Victoria Stone comes in, and somebody says, hey, could you print me off the record? You can go to show report, adult display. And there you're going to have a printable record of everything that's on that person's basic record, the first part. If you want their services and so forth, you'd have to do more. But each area, services, referrals, will have a print report like this. The downside to that, and if Cheryl O'Neill was still working, I'll swear I could hear her saying this. We don't want paper floating around. You know, for privacy, it's a nightmare. If you do print it off, once you get done using it, it's either got to go in a locked file or it needs to be shredded. So use it if it fits what you're doing at your agency, otherwise ignore it. And that's the show report. It's also, let me show you in another location, like hotline calls. You're on a hotline call list, which is right here. Same thing as the others, even if it's squashed over here, it is another list view. So if you chose one of the calls, you could show report, hotline call display. And there's not as much information on these. And there it would be. So, quick question from everybody. The 4 type of reports without me showing it to you are what? Either in the message or speak up, either way.
Co-located.
Well, that's an individual report,
Oh,
but what's the types of report?
oh,
Muskie, FIFSPA.
No, those are the individual reports.
uh-huh.
What are those reports, the ones you were mentioning, Bree? What type of reports are those?
Oh, those are funder reports versus
Exactly.
Okay.
Okay, what's the other 3 type of reports?
Flex report.
Yep. Two more. One we just did a little bit ago that looks like Excel spreadsheets. That's called a list view or list report. And then the last one is a display report. But those are the 4 things I want you to keep in your mind, because when we're going to look for things, that is how we find it. The one you'll use the most is the funder reports. The one you use the second most is the flex reports. The one we'll use to troubleshoot when you call me will probably be the list reports. And some people like to go there anyway. Display reports probably won't use much. Now, which of those 4 uses formulas?
The display reports?
Actually, no, it doesn't. Which has complicated formulas built into it.
I think it's the funder reports, right?
It is. It's the funder reports. Those you never see because they're in the background. Which of these reports use filtering?
Funder reports.
Well, funder report does, but you don't. I should say, which of these use filtering that you do, that you set up filtering?
That was the list report.
This report is one. What else?
The flex.
Flex.
Yeah.
Yeah, those 2 both do. And the display report really does no filtering. And the funder report does, but it's all hidden. So yeah, when it comes to the funder reports, the only thing you have to know is it's a bunch of formulas that are running for you. So you have to do the Fte percentages. Good job. That's the 4 types of reporting. Now I'm going to give you a choice. Do you want to take a break before we go into admin functions? Or do you want to dive straight through and try and get done earlier? We probably have up to an hour of work left, 45 minutes to an hour for sure.
I'm good to keep going.
Well, let's do this. Let's take a 5-minute break. Well, I'm going to take it back. People probably need a bathroom break and don't want to say it, and that's my fault. Let's take a 10-minute break, and we'll meet back at let's say 10:20, and then we will fly. So thank you, folks. You're doing great.
Sounds good. Thank you.
You bet.
Thanks.
Yeah, a little plug for my kitty there. Her groomer made that video and she used it on our website, so. My kitty is a sweetie, both of them, but Paris, the one that was in that video, I've had her since she was 3.5 months old, and she's now 7.5 years. So we are tight as can be. She's across the room, sleeping on her cat tree, behaving very well this morning. Give me a thumbs up if you're back. Okay, Christy, you there yet? Okay, let's go ahead and get started because I know Christy's shorthanded at Klamath right now. And what I'm going to say is, I've said part of this to her. I'm just going to, in reports, realize you're going to come up with data that doesn't look right. You always have control at the end of what you're turning in. What you are turning in, if you're the ED, you're responsible to the funder for what you're turning in. So make sure it matches what you feel you're doing. We are giving you a tool to get the best data we can. Flip side of that, though, is of all the different calls from EDs I've had going, the database is messing up. This just isn't right. I'll be honest, probably 1 out of 25 has actually been an issue that we have passed on and looked at in adjusting the database. Normally, it's that the data has either the data hasn't been entered right, the understanding of how the data is working is unclear, or that that you're needing to clean up your data over time. I mean, that's one thing with a database. As you start entering stuff, people are entering it, learning how to get it entered. And every year you enter it, they're going to get a hold of it better, and the data is going to get better and better. And when you run your reports are going to be more accurate. So if you see an issue that you think you might have, call me always, and I'll walk you through it, and we'll check and see how things are mapped and figure out what's happening. But don't stress yourself out that there's a lot of errors in the database. There's not. There are a couple things we're working on tweaking right now for the reports that I'm looking at that I want to get tweaked, but they change slowly. We normally do 1 to 2 major report changes per year because they cost us money to do. So, and the coalition's doing it, paying for that, so you don't have to worry. But just know that we're aware of it and that it is a good tool for you guys to use. Let me show you real quick something. I'm going to share my screen again. There are tools, other things that I've sent out to you. One thing I sent out today was the current mapping documents. I'm going to pull that over here, which you'll see something like this once you unzip it. These they will make some sense to you. They won't necessarily make all sense. But if you were to want to know, okay, on the VOCA mapping document, if you were to double click that, and I don't have the new report included in here yet, we'll get that to you once it actually runs out, or once it actually is distributed. But if you look at these, okay, you're going to see something like this. And what this is this was the mapping document before it got turned into a report. So is it actually the exact last formulas that were used in the report? No, but it's the next to last in the process. But it's going to tell you, if you go down here, for example, these are great on types of victimizations. You would see to pull these volumes or these values over here, you would need to start here and go from all clients in question 1, go through all their services within the reporting period and pull the related victimization. Count only once per victimization type. If they have victimization types in check all that apply, count them in these categories only once. From all anonymous hotline calls where existing client is empty within the reporting period, pull from the victimization types. Then it would flow from that into, and it's enter the count of individuals who receive services. So it's basically going to be for each category, it's going to be who received or who had this victimization. And during this reporting period. So if a person had a service and the victimization related to that service was adult physical assault, that's going to be counted in that Osnium value. If they had 3 services that were adult physical assault, that's going to be counted once for that person. So that's just the formula we have to go through and look. On each one of these, it's a flow through of information. You do not need to know this well, but this is, if you have problems with a number on a report, I will probably pull up this document and we will walk it through going, okay, with that question, question B on direct services, you're looking at individual advocacy. Okay, great. Here's where it's pulling from. Let's track it back to where it was pulled. And let's go to the list views and see what values we have in there for the services during that period of time. So it's there. I just wanted to give you a little understanding of what it is. Feel free to glance through it. It helps some people. It may confuse you. And if it confuses you, don't worry about it. But it's something we will go through when we need to. Any questions on those? Okay, great. Now we're coming up to admin. And let me start off with, we're going to do first off some technical things about administration. And then I'm going to go into some helpful hints for the database. But let's start off with the technical things first. The most normal thing you're going to do in admin is with your staff. And you come with a set amount of staff roles. You probably don't need to change these, but you have the freedom to if you want to. But like the agency administrator can edit model, it will show you what that person can do. Staff limited, who has a little more permissions. A staff who can only read the information, and they even have a volunteer in here. So those are your staff models. But when you go into where you're going to be in most is in other staff lists. And you can add your new staff this way. When you pull up a staff, you're going to be assigning them what other information you need. If you have an ID that you want to put in there, you can. Phone numbers, address, that's not required. Their FTE we talked about is active. If you want to lock their account for a while, or if they're a volunteer, you can do that. Change password on first login. That will make them have to set a new password when they log in. So there's these different permissions. All of this stuff is explained well in that quick start guide. So feel free to look at that. You assign them a role. In this case, Thomas is an administrator. Now, if this person was a primary advocate, listed as a primary advocate for any of your clients, it would show up here. Let me go to a different person. I think Osnium user 1, Oregon user 1 is going to be, yeah. Now they are listed presently on that first tab. They are listed as the primary advocate for this amount of people. So like if I clicked on Audrey Nash, and you're on her first information tab. When you come down here on general information, you're going to see the primary advocate is Oregon user 1. And that's always a person who creates the record unless you change it later. And if you change it later, remember you have to save it after you change it. Now, this is all pretty straightforward, but the one thing you do want to remember is if a person is on staff and they leave, what do you do? Any guesses?
Are you supposed to keep them in the system so that everything stays tied to them, but then just lock the account, or what would be the appropriate thing there?
Very
Or
good.
just
Yeah.
inactive.
Take them, they're not active. Yeah, if you want to lock it, great. But you keep them in because exactly what you said. Otherwise, you're losing all the reporting information on that person. And plus anything they've created. If you delete it, you're going to be setting all sorts of information free in the database that can't be accessed. So never delete an advocate at your agency, a person who's been entered as a user. You have unlimited users, so you don't have to worry about that. Instead, make them inactive. Feel free to lock the account. Do that, the person cannot do anything. So, but I've had one agency that deleted a person and it caused them a nightmare. And in that case, you pretty much have to call up Osnium and see if they can recover anything. If they can't, which they probably won't be able to, you'll have to re-enter all the information that you can by hand. So just wanted to circle that, highlight it, put stars all over it. Do not delete a person. The primary advocate 2, again, this is a little list view. So if you wanted to, if you were wanting to know which advocates does this staff person cover, you can come down here, you could right click it and you can print it. You can export it. You can filter it. You can do whatever you want. But that's something I've had people come up to me and go, how do I know which clients? There's several ways you can know which clients your person is working of, but this is the actual primary advocate 2. It's a quick way to do it. Okay, so beyond that, what you can also do is there are dashboards you can play around. You can't do too much on those because we're all modified. We're all using a unified database between all the agencies. So you don't have a lot of things you can modify that way, because if you modify it, then the next update, you'll lose all your modifications. So but there are down here at the bottom, there are drop downs. There are certain lists within the database that are totally available for your use. And they are programs, discharge reason, service location, state location. These lists, and normally you can edit them in the field, but you can also edit them here. Like if you wanted to add more languages on the primary language list, you can come here, go to new language, and add it. So those lists can be modified. The reason why they can be modified is they don't pull to any one-click report. Anything that pulls to a one-click report cannot be modified. Where this can come in really powerful for you. I mean, it's great in a lot of spots, but some of the obvious spots, if you had, would be okay, on services. There are several that can be modified here. If you pulled up one of the services, you can see that you can modify on your programs. So you can add all your programs and track what program they were actually involved with when they got this service. And that doesn't go out to, get reported to one-click reports, though you can do a flex report off of it. And also you can modify the service location and put all the locations that your agency uses. So you can run a flex report. I want to know everything that we're doing at this spot, everything we're doing at that spot. You can separate them out that way. That's all completely available. Another thing, as an admin, that is super powerful, and you can talk to me about this if you want to. If you have something you want to track, and I mentioned this before, but I want to just re-emphasize it here. If you have a weird item that you need to track in a report that doesn't fit into anything we have, odds are that we might be able to track it under program enrollment. And this is where I mentioned it in passing, but if you had a jacuzzi program that you needed to check to report to your city for, you can come in under programs and create a new program. This is totally modifiable. It doesn't go to any one-click report. You can create a new jacuzzi program, put the date on, and if it's just a one-time shot that you're needing, like a service you're doing, you can put the start date and end date and any notes. And this will allow you then, after you run your other reports, if you want to pull this number, go to a flex report, go to the flex report for program enrollment and run it and filter it out for the people in the jacuzzi program. And suddenly you have, within the dates that you're looking for, you have your numbers for the people who did that jacuzzi program, so you can report on it. That can be used for so many things. So this is kind of a wild card. It's really built to use, like if you want to know who's in your counseling program at any one time, you can do that. Because when you put an end date on it, they no longer show up on the list. But it's a wild card for anything else that you might need to track too. Does that make sense to people? That is something admins have a lot of power over. So your lists, you can view and manage from these drop-down lists. You can either do them in the value or there. Now reporting we went through. Dashboards you can play around with, but there's not a whole bunch you can do there. Now the next thing I want to take you to is, let's actually go back to the manual at this point. And starting with the addendum page, page 60, we'll actually go on to the next page now. Let me go ahead and you're going to see tips for a speedier entry. And I mentioned this in the first day training, but the power of save and copy. This is something I would really tell you as admins that you need to be on top of your people. If they're not using it, they're going to be entering stuff way too slow. Anytime they're doing like if they're doing 6 services for a person, they better be using it this way. Enter one. Basically the whole process is here. Enter the service, then click on save, click on copy, which creates a clone, make changes, go back, enter the next service, click on save, click on copy, make changes, enter the service, keep going until you're done, and then hit save and close. You need to make sure your people are using save and copy. It will speed up things greatly. People who are doing things one at a time have problems with keeping up. And another great tip is if a client is returning to receive the same service they received before, like the week before, maybe they come every week for something, you can go to the last time they were in for that particular need and double click on it. And all you have to do, if it's the same services, all you have to do is change probably the date and time. And then you can hit save and close. After clicking copy first, save and close. These are great tips. People who start doing these find their entry time speeds up quite a bit. Second thing, this is a total data entry deal, and I did tons of data entry when I was younger, is learning the forms and shortcuts. If you have people who are doing a lot of data entry in your agency, encourage them to use tabs and fly through. And when they get to a field that's a drop down, like for gender, if they get to that field and hit F, they'll have female will show up right away. And then they can go to the next field. When they get used to it, it's a lot faster than just going, okay, what do I need to enter next? What do I need? And you only have to do something like this the first time you go through. Because once you've got the basics entered, next time you come back, it's easier entry. And that's all explained there in that area. These are good handouts if you want to hand out just a certain section of this to your staff. Another thing I encourage people to do, different agencies have different choices. We are having to cover information for everybody in your whole agency, for all the agencies. So if you go back here and go, okay, I'm looking at this. Let's actually go back to the table of contents. And let's say, okay, let's take a look at something that's kind of, okay, let's look at an easy one would be, let's just look at an adult one. Okay, as you're going through here, each of these fields has the list of the values that are there. If you go through, it's like, okay, not in diversity, you don't want to necessarily get those small, but like rural status, we only use these 3. You could go through every field that has stuff like this, and most PDF programs will allow you to do something like this. Click, highlight. Okay, and highlight the fields that your agency actually uses. You can do that, and once you're done going through the manual once, you could save off the manual and distribute the manual with all the choices you want your advocates to use. So they don't have to go between all the choices. They don't have to sit here and go, what does our agency actually use? It'll help you to define what your agency uses if you go through and take a look at all the lists. One time through, you can look at any of these list fields, anything that doesn't fit your agency that you don't want people to use, just let them know and mark the things you do want them to use. Demographics wasn't the best example, but it may be more like there may be services you do not use, deliver, so forth. But customize the manual the way you want it. EDs, go through it. Once it's done, save it off and distribute the edited manual to your people with highlights in it or any notes you want to put. That's a way of having everybody working consistently in your agency. Getting back to, let's go to add values. It's not working. Why is this not working? Oh, because I was still in highlight. Undo that. I don't want to highlight it. Okay, highlight off. Go back to select. Okay, now it's still on highlight. Select. Okay, there it is. Okay. Add default values. Here's all the information you need for this. It's a great way of getting everybody going faster. If they're going to be pulling up the same value time after time, then you might as well not have to have them choose it. Like if they're always the same, rural status was always the main choice. Come to it, set it. And if you have admin rights, then you can set it as the initial value. In this case, it's, let me clear it. Okay, now when I come in and say, okay, set as initial value. Now, every time somebody comes to this field to enter, it's already set to what they need to set. And they can always change it. But the first time they look at it, they're not going to have to do anything. They can just ignore it. And that's going to be true if there's anything that is default that you want to set that way. Great, set it. That will speed your people up in their entry. So play around with that. rural status is an obvious one, but there are other areas too where counties is a great one. Cities and counties. You can set those to where they default out to where you are. So. Let's cancel that. Okay. So coming back to the manual. So that the list of how to do that is right there. Are the instructions. Set your funding streams and Fte percentages. We talked about that. Make sure that's done before your reports. There's documentation if you need to remember. Oh, here's what I was looking for earlier. This is the blackout date. How it works. There, the fiscal October 1st. So new client if they come before that date and come after that date. So on that second date, they'd be considered a new client. If they come 2 times after that date, they're considered a returning client that second time. So that's good visual to remember that with. Outcome surveys. We did not talk about this. Let me go through this real quick. Let me close this. No. Okay, and outcome surveys are reached here. And there's 2 parts. There's 2 things you have to do with outcome surveys. Both you're tracking the information you get in from them, and you're also tracking how many you distributed. So for the ones you get in, basically, this is slightly clunky, but it works. Had a little gnat come at me. You'll want to have a person with a stack of surveys sit down to enter them. And they're going to hit new survey, outcome data. And they're going to get, this is the form that the state wants you to use. It's slightly different than on the scale than what the federal uses, but that's okay because we've got it mapped to where it'll pull where it needs to go. So you put in the survey date, survey type, whether it's counseling, non-shelter based advocacy, shelter services, or support group. Choose where you're giving them the survey from. The score, this is only for your internal use. If you want to have a score, put it in there. Doesn't matter, you can leave it blank otherwise. There is no purpose for it otherwise. It's slightly an artifact, but we left it there because you might want to use it. The outcome data. The service provided by this program helped me make informed choices about my situation. There are 3 choices. Strongly agree, or I'm sorry, 5 choices. Strongly agree, disagree, strongly disagree, or no opinion. There are only 2 choices on most of federal answers, but that's okay. We've mapped them where they need to go. And same thing with both of these. After working with this agency, I have some new ideas of how to stay safe, and I know more about the resources that may be available, including how to access them. So you would put your answers off of the survey, then you would hit save and new and do the next one. And you just go through the stack doing them like this. And once, I guess you do have to hit that outcome data again, one step slower. But you keep flying through and the stack, but that's the part 1 of entering them. The part 2 is that at some sort of schedule, whether you keep track on a piece of, some sort of chart when they're being distributed, some point you need to come back and go to outcome surveys to surveys distributed. And on this, you'll go to new surveys distributed. And like if you were doing it from a support group, you go, okay, as support group on this date, you need to put the date so it falls within the reporting period. Support group, we distributed 80. Then save and new if you're going to do more. Save and close if you're done. Then when you run any reports that pull information on surveys, they're going to pull off of that. Or if you do a flex report, there's a flex report on that. So those are the 2 steps for outcome surveys. Any questions on that? Documentation is here. Next area. This may hit some of you or may not. Osnium and counselors. DVRC is one agency that I've worked this through with incredibly. You need to consider, can a counselor use Osnium and be compliant with privacy issues? If you have, let me read this through. The first involves the privacy issues, HIPAA, that the counselor has with their clients. There is no foolproof way to hide therapy notes in Osnium for other users or advocates. Thus, we don't feel like they can put their client notes in Osnium and they have to use a separate system, whether it's paper notes, or a different program. The second point involves compliance with VAWA. Survivor records are only supposed to be accessible to staff of an agency who falls under the privilege requirements of your agency, with 40-hour core advocacy training. If the counselor is on staff and not an outside contractor, and if they have met privilege requirements, yeah, they can have a login and access to people's information in Osnium. If they don't have the privilege of 40-hour advocacy training, then they cannot. They should not access information in Osnium. What happens if they do not meet privilege, but you want to track their services in Osnium? You can do it. And this comes down to, what do you do in that case? Let's go back to Osnium itself. Staff. You can create them as a new staff. And just do it like you totally normally would. But when you create their password, their credentials, don't give it to them. Don't ever let them know how to log into the system. And what happens is then their name will show up in all the drop downs. So if they hand in their information then on paper to you that I did these services, you can have a person on staff go in and enter their services. And when they enter their services, they can pull up a person's record, create a new service. Services, okay. New service. They can assign the advocate from the list because you will have added that person to the list, but since you never gave them credentials for them to be able to log in, they won't be able to log in and see people's information. However, your reports will pull their information where they need to go. And that's covered in that section. The counselor, any questions about that? That's not used real often, but it's really helpful if you need it. As you come back, you'll be getting your information about your annual support and maintenance fee beginning of December. It always gets mailed out. So that's coming. It was 12. Was it 1250 or 12 something? No, it was, I can't remember what it was last year. It was around 1260 or 70, I think. And there is assistance available for agencies who need it, and we'll give information on that. But that gives you your 8 hours of support from Osnium, which lasts great and gives you every time you need to contact them. And it gives you all the updates that come through. We cover all the other support fees of updating the program itself from the coalition. If you need to contact them, the email support@osnium.com is right there, or their phone number is right there. And it's in Eastern Canada, remember, it's 3 hours difference. And that's the end, except this is a little cool thing. SEDs you probably wouldn't want to know about. There's an in-person contact form at the back. This we created during the beginning of the pandemic for people who weren't able to be in the office as a way of tracking. This tracks everything that you do with a client. It's all in 5 pages, I believe. And it's mostly checkboxes and stuff. I would not necessarily use this when you're with a client to check them in or anything. That's not what it's for. It's more for your notes to track what you did afterwards. But there is a second thing this does that is great. And I'm going to have to adjust it because it won't fit with the state report so well. But right now you'll see this little all, some, and none. And then you'll see client info, V for VOCA, M for Muskie underlined. PIP says F, ODSVS is O, striving to meet the needs S, and C is co-located. People have often asked what fields are actually used for reports in the database. Anything that is green is used by every program pretty much. Everything that is yellow is used by multiple programs or multiple funders, I should say. Everything that's red is not used by anybody. So that's optional. ID number if you want to assign an ID. Primary languages nobody pulls. That's just for the agency's information. We come down here like sexual orientation. You can see that that VOCA, PIPSA, and ODSVS pull from that information in their reports. Limited English proficiency, VOCA, Muskie, FIPSA, and ODSVS all pull that. And you start to understand as you look at this that there is victimization types, primary, secondaries, only Muskie and ODSVS. Victimization type, yeah, same thing. Otherwise, everything uses those 2 columns. You start to use that a majority of the information in the database actually flows into a report of some sort, which is overwhelming, but it gives you a little control of the information. Reasons for exit, destination exit, those don't report anywhere. State location doesn't report anywhere. These referrals from or to. Let's see. Where did I put this information from? Ooh, oops, for me, I did not put the. It looks like I did not put on this last section. I did not put. Okay, that is all. State type is all. That is all. Okay, but on these last, I did not put the breakdown of what reports pull them. I'm sorry for that on the last page. But this will give you a sense of where the information goes, which a lot of people find really happy that are helpful EDs when they're dealing with their advocates on trying to explain why we're asking for certain types of information. And again, we're getting a new unified state report coming probably at the end of the month, and you'll be getting more information. They've already been talking about it, but both from DOJ and DHS on when they want it turned in. I think they're both taking twice a year. So, but you'll run the same report, just you will enter the information by hand into the website for DOJ, and you'll be able to hand in the Excel spreadsheets to DHS for the information. Let me stop sharing for a second. That is mostly everything. Let's open it up for questions. Everybody's brains are dead. This is brain dead type stuff to go through. Well, if there are no questions, I think I'm about ready to let us go. Oh, thank you, Allison. Yeah, and let me just really emphasize, I'm your resource. So my phone number is on all my emails I send out. You can contact me. You can email me. I do take, during pandemic, I've been taking Fridays off every week, but I work from home in South Salem. And if I'm not, if I'm not working, I will let your phone call go over to voicemail and I'll deal with it the next day. But I normally contact you back normally within hours, if not right away. So feel free to call. Feel free to even that's not limited to just EDs. If your advocates have questions about the database, feel free to allow them to call me if you want to. It will not, it's job security for me. So I will protect my time if I have to. Some people like Christy call me too much, but otherwise.
You're on my speed dial.
Oh, that's awesome. I have no problem with that. And
I'm like,
I am
"Hey, one
basically
more
too,
question."
I'm kind of the filter for what actually needs to go to Osnium. It's kind of, if it has to do with the program itself, installation, technical issues, I'll pass you on to Osnium right away. If it has to do with how the program is built, how we have customized Osnium, that's going to be handled through me. And if I see there's an area from that what we're talking about that needs to be modified, I will take it and run it to Osnium. And if it's something like with a report we need to have changed, just to let you know, if we see we need to make modifications to a report, it will probably be that I'll have to lump some things together, take them to Osnium, get a quote from Osnium, take it back to the coalition, have them run it through the budgets, get the money, see if it's available, do a payment to Osnium, have them start the process. So the turnaround is normally 4 to 6 months on those changes. So I normally do report changes once or twice a year. So, the other thing, otherwise there are updates they are doing all the time that will flow out. You guys were awesome. And I mean that. This has been one of my most fun classes. So have a good day. Go enjoy your extra time. And if you have any questions or need anything, let me know.
Thank you, Vanessa.
You're welcome. Bye
Thanks,
all.
Vanessa. Bye-bye.